everyone. Good morning to all of you. I hope everybody is doing fine. Welcome to to today's YouTube live. Very excited about this one. But before we begin, just a couple of announcements to tell you guys how this usually works, as well as what's coming up over the next week. On Tuesday, we have a lineup of Gauravs, which is Gaurav Kapoor, Gaurav Gupta, and Sumit's Gaurav. Thursday, we have Uruj and Sumaira, which is going to be fun as well. On Saturday, we have author of Sacred Games, Vikram Chandra. And yeah, as I've already announced, Harsha Bhogle is going to be here on the 31st of August with your best friend, Kumar Varun, as well as Anu Menon. So that's going to be a super fun one on 31st. I'll tell you the lineup as soon as I have locked for Sunday, but I think it's probably going to be Amit Tandon and Khamba and Neeti Palta on Sunday. So that's about it. If you've never seen the show before, the way it works is that I have guests, I talk to them, and then I take some questions from Super Chat as well as from normal chat. I just want to tell you that the format today is basically as follows. I'm going to be talking to my guest, and at some stage, I will try and take as much Super Chat as I can, but you know, it might come a little later, and I might not be able to take most of them. So good morning to Arjun Singh, good morning to Dhruv Raghav, good morning to Ruben Kadam and Subhash S and all of you out there. Just one more thing is today I have a show happening called Traveling Pants at 9 o'clock. Oh no, sorry, 8 p.m. If you want, tickets are still available. Tickets are on sorabh.com, and you can also support this podcast on InstaMojo and on PayPal. So that's fun, guys. A lot of fun. I'm very nervous about today's guest. I've read his book, which is really good. I literally read it from page to page. Really interesting, and the last few chapters were glorious. I got to introduce him. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause in your heads and your minds for Lieutenant General H.S. Panag. Hello, sir. How are you?
Very well. And how are you all?
I think I'm very good, sir. I just got to give you the ultimate amount of respect, which is that usually I've done about 25 of these, and this is the first time before one of these lives that I've had a bath before doing one of these. So how's the lockdown treating you, sir?
Well, I stay on a farm, so there's no lockdown for me really, and it's my own land, ancestral land. I have 6,000 square yards. Then in the Punjab countryside, we are very well connected by roads. I cycle 30 kilometers every day. So it's no issue really.
I read that bit about 30 kilometers of cycling per day, and I was like, do you still do that? And you've answered my question immediately.
Well, I still do it, rain, hail or sunshine. And if it's raining very heavily outside, well, then I do it. I've got an indoor cycle. I do it indoors, the same amount of time and same amount of distance.
I was reading a story. So in this Indian Army, the book that you've written, the last few chapters are about your father, and there's one story about how he used to cycle in the village, and they didn't have money for tubes, so they used jute and something else to create the tubes.
What they would do is that they would use the old jute bags and old bed sheets, make them round very tight and tighten them together, then put them into the old tires and then tie the whole thing to the rim. See, our whole village had one, maybe two cycles. There was no cycle pump. And tires were very expensive. And this bicycle that I spoke about, I think I mentioned in the story also that it was bought second hand for 16 rupees.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, this is the story of the somewhere around late 20s or early 30s. So that's the time when he was in his childhood in the village.
So basically, not only is defense in your blood, there's also cycling in your blood. There's been a lot of cycling.
Yes.
So okay, I mean, there's a lot of questions. I don't know where to start. So I will just tell Super Chat that you guys can please ask your questions. I'll try and get to them probably after about 20 minutes, but keep them ready and we'll try and keep abreast of them soon enough. Also, by the way, sir, when I put up your photograph on on my communities, YouTube communities, a lot of the comments were that you look like either older Bobby Deol or younger Dharmendra.
Well, it's like this. You see, the Sikhs enjoy an advantage.
Right.
One is that if you can wear a turban, in any case, a smart turban adds to your personality. So your bald head can't be seen, or your receding hairline. Then a bit of cosmetics that I've learned from my wife, keeps the beard dark and brown or whatever color you want. And overall, and the turban also helps in hide a bit of wrinkles and all. So one is you look young. And then because I'm cycling, I think I'm blessed. That at 72, I'm as fit as a fiddle. I have, in fact, in my entire life, I have never been hospitalized.
Oh, wow.
In the 40 years that I spent in the army, I was never hospitalized, and I don't think I missed out because of being sick, a parade or something. For maybe I could count on my fingertips in the entire 40 years.
Wow. That's 72. Yeah, I wouldn't take you for a 72-year-old under any circumstances. That's really impressive.
And in my family, we live long. My father, he died at 96. My grandfather at 95. And
Yeah.
so we live long, also eat good food. And you see, most of us, like my father, I also have written about it in the book. In fact, we spent our earlier childhood in the village. And village life, you only those who experienced it can know about it. And those who experienced both sides, lived in a village, a proper village, and a city, then you can really tell the difference. But today, when I tell the children in the village, which is about a kilometer from my place, sometimes go to the school and tell them stories. Now we are really rural areas. We are no longer rural areas or single urban areas, because let's say the houses in my village are state of the art. I think good about 25% people have an air conditioner, at least one in the house, and our streets are paved. It's our village is always very well organized, and whatever I tell them that this is what we did, and these are the areas where we played, and these were the wells that we used. They have no clue about it. So that's how times have changed. But certainly the hard living sort of made us probably more resilient to face the rigors of life.
There's so many stories that I'm trying to figure out which one to start with, but I think I should just give a little bit of an introduction to because a lot of our younger viewers who are not probably aware, because a lot of people have an appointment viewing. So if you're just joining in right now and you didn't follow my YouTube communities, Lieutenant General HS Panag is retired, obviously. 40 years. Is it 40 years, or do you count the 4 years training? So is it 44 years in the Indian Army?
Oh, actually, no, you do not count for normal. You do not count the training period. But since I did join in 1964, the National Defence Academy, and retired in 2008, so total becomes 44. But otherwise, it is 40. Commission
Okay,
service.
So 40 years, you commanded a total of almost 6,75,000 troops. That's
I just gave out. You see, the command is when the people actually you act as a commander, and it starts with when you're a platoon commander. A platoon commander has 36 men under him. A company commander has 120. A battalion commander has 700-800. A brigade commander has 3,500. Div commander like my division, had 20,000 troops. It was a mechanized division. A corps commander, you have 75,000 troops. And as Northern Army commander, I had 370,000 troops. And from there I went to Central Command. I commanded another 2 lakh plus troops. I totaled them up, it comes to about 7 lakhs. And that also means that almost these many number of 7,000 odd officers. I wrote their CRs and all and ACRs and all. So that's how it is.
Sir, I could barely run a comedy company which had 6 people in it, so I am way beyond impressed. Like,
No,
that's
military is a much more organized affair.
yeah.
Army is very organized, and it's a layered organization. I mean, in the sense that a lot of time people say, "Oh, the boss is away for so many days," but the people don't miss him. It's a layered organization.
So it's interesting about I think let's start from sort of childhood, and I think there's two stories that really struck out to me for with regard to both you and your father, Colonel Shamsher Singh. He overpowered a dacoit at the age of 15.
Yeah. See, my grandfather was a Thanedar.
Yeah.
He was a Thanedar in the Patiala state. Uh, uh, it was a princely state, and he was a Thanedar. And he became a Thanedar in 1910. And part of my childhood was spent in the rural thanas of Malwa. Malwa area of Punjab is the one that lies between Satluj and Yamuna side, the side. So then he was a very good sportsman, and as I mentioned earlier, he used to stay in the village, but then in the Thana is a very good sportsman. He learned riding. My grandfather, we have these Nihangs, the kamikaze troops of the Sikh army. So they are still there. They're the ones who dressed up in blue attire and ride horses at the famous Hola Mohalla at Anandpur Sahib. So he sent him to a dera to learn riding. And as a young man, he could, ride the two horses with one leg on each horse. So all this was going on, and he was fond of shikar and all. So my grandfather had gone looking for a sort of a dacoit. Now, while they were searching for him in our area, so he took my grandfather's shotgun, and he was a teenager, and he went out to shoot some birds. And suddenly the dacoit, he was escaping from that area, and he was on a dachi. Dachi is the female camel. Those days, the eastern side of Punjab, that is towards, or the western side, toward Bathinda, Sangrur, it was all a desert area. Because canals were just about reaching and tubewells hadn't come up. There was no electricity. So there was a lot of sand. So the female camel, being more docile, was used for transportation, riding. He was on a dachi, and so when my father saw him, so he sort of that guy also saw him, and he thought that this fellow is it's a good opportunity. There's a young boy carrying a 12-bore gun. It's a good opportunity to take a gun. But the dacoit himself didn't have a weapon. He had a lance, a pala. So he jumped from the dachi and came charging at my father. My father held his wits, and so he let fly. He was having birdshot in his 12-bore gun. So he let fly at his legs, and the dacoit was down. Of course, the noise was heard, and the dacoit was finally overpowered. And then he got a certificate from the Maharaja of Patiala for having, of course, it was said that he captured the dacoit and all. So that kind of thing. This is how, but then those were the times, that's how things happened. And there were, of course, by the time 47, 48, independence, the dacoits and all had disappeared, at least from Punjab, because urbanization was taking place, roads had been developed. But what we are talking of is sometimes in the early 30s.
Right. And the Maharaja Patiala was actually your father. Like every time your father had a very good relationship with him, and every time he used to go.
Yeah, later this was his father. This was the father of this was Maharaja Bhupinder Singh in the early 30s, because Yadvinder Singh, whom my father met when he joined the army, took over only in 1938. So when
Right, right, right.
he joined, as I've narrated that story, that he was not being the son of a zimindar. Actually, he was just the son of a thanedar, and thanedar also because he became a thanedar because he had done his matriculation. Very
Right.
rare those days. Otherwise, the family had a very poor sort of background, very limited land holding. But he found that he was enrolled as a JCO cadet,
Hmm.
junior commissioned officer cadet. That means after training, he'll become a junior commissioned officer direct. To begin with, they were all ensigns, kind of sepoy rank. That the others who were landholders, landlord sons and all, they were made officer cadet. That after training, they will become officers. So Mahaja Yadvinder Singh was visiting the army. He had 3-4 battalions in the state. So my father walked up to him, from the parade. He says, "Look, I am better than most." No, actually, there was something going on, and the Maharaja complimented him. Okay, well done, you are good. And he then said, "Okay, look, why am I being treated as a JCO cadet when I am better than all these people?" So the Maharaja saw the point. He said, "Okay, fine. Give him a chance. Let him go before the selection board." The selection board used to be held in Ambala Cantonment, and it was run by the British Army, because they used to send the cadets for training there. And my father was sent, and he was number one in the selection for the officers. Now then there was limited vacancies. They said no, he can go later, etc., etc. But Maharaja Yadvinder Singh overruled them, and that's why he went to the Indian Military Academy in January 1940.
Wow, it's a great story. There's so many stories in this book which are. I think one of the, and by the way, you also had a story of bravery when you were young, where you killed a honey badger who was attacking you, which is
That one is a great one. You
yeah,
see, all the old cantonments, especially the ones in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Bengal, uh, they were they were massive. The cantonments were very big, and the bungalows used to be very big also. And the bungalows occupied by lieutenant colonels and all were generally had 4-5 acres of land, and they were all made in the old style with the sloping roofs and two levels of roofs, because the first set, then they would have the roshandans, or the ventilators on top,
right, right,
between the two roofs. So the light. So like what happens these days when we make houses, the inner rooms have got no light. So that time this ventilator thing was very on, and so the ventilators were there all around between the two roof levels, so that the inner rooms got the light, and those rooms were always had a higher roof. So veranda all round, and kitchen and everything a little outside, and umpteen number of servant quarters, because there was uh, any number of people, khansamas and malis and dhobis. The wages were very, very low. You could get a
right.
khansama for 40-50 rupees. And a khansama who knew all the dishes that people make in 5 stars today, because they had worked with the Mem Saabs and all,
Right.
before independence. Anyway, to cut the long story short, so we landed up, I was about 8 years old, and we landed up at this bungalow, number 1 Mandir Marg in Mathura. Similar style bungalow, and so there was, we all as young kids wanted a room, and there were 4 huge bedrooms. So I was given a bedroom, and my father just asked me, "I hope you'll not be scared." I said, "Scared for what for?" I mean, like the bravado of an 8-year-old. And then somewhere in the middle of the night, I heard noises coming from we had these old style fireplaces from the chimney, and then pitter patter of feet. And in the daytime, the old servants of the bungalow had told us that this bungalow is haunted, because there's a mazar of a Pir Saab, and when the bungalow was constructed 60-70 years ago, sometimes in 1880 or something like that, that this was they had demolished the mazar, and he visits the place. Anyway, so I was very scared, but being sort of young and this thing, I didn't want to admit it. I wanted to be brave. So I sort of continued, and I kept a hockey stick with me and kept a candle and a light in case the electricity went off. And then one day, a week later, there was moonlit night. And the staff had told us, look, it happens generally on a full moon night, full moon night, something going to happen. But anyway, I was very scared, but I slept off and dozed off. Suddenly, I heard something, and two, what the size of a medium-sized dog, animals emerged from the chimney, and I was in the sort of mosquito net, and when I got up and they sort of they came on me, and they bit me all over the place, scratching legs and all, and this thing. So but somehow out of the struggle, I got free of the mosquito net and got hold of my hockey stick and swung wildly and hit one of them, and that one, went unconscious. And then hearing the commotion and the noise, my father came, my mother came, and in the meantime, the second animal just climbed up. Right. So now there was a controversy, which later on I also tried to resolve, even now when I consulted some wildlife experts, whether it was a honey badger or whether it was the Indian civet cat or called the Bogie. Now, these were very common. People can't imagine that sort of a thing today, because in the older bungalows, both these in central India and in these areas, Bundelkhand and all, these animals were very, very common. Civet cats are not known to attack, and the honey badgers are very small but very ferocious. And it's in fact, if you check the Wikipedia page, it says that they would even at times take on a lion,
Yeah.
So I assumed it was I still go by the fact it was a honey badger, not a cover biju. So that is the story of the ghost of the bungalow. And in 2001 I went back to that place, and a friend of mine, now a brigadier. I was then a major general commanding the armored division at Hisar, and our corps headquarters was at Mathura, so I went there to visit. And this brigadier, who was a friend of mine, he was 6 months junior to me, but still waiting his turn to become major general. So he said, look, the bungalow is very nice, but there are these strange noises that we keep hearing from the ceiling and from the fireplaces and all. So I realized that covered bijus are still around. So then I told the story of the covered biju. And so that is how the ghost of the bungalow story, which I recalled and I wrote about it.
It's a great story. I actually have been. I have two young children. So there's one YouTube video which is about how honey badgers are ridiculously ferocious, like whether taking down lions, and they have absolutely no fear for anything. So I prefer the story being a honey badger. I completely agree with you. I think civet cat nahi, it is a honey badger, confirmed.
That is the myth that I would like to probably whenever, but it is interesting recalling them. And when I regaled my children with these stories and many other officers' children and telling them about such things.
It's a great story. Okay, so let's come to so you joined in 1964. You said you joined the NDA in 1964. I got to ask you about the war in 1962, and there's an entire couple of chapters about dealing with China back then, and you speak about, and I think this has been covered quite extensively with regard to how it was Nehru's fault back then with regard to sort of how we were not ready for the attack. So can you tell us a little bit about the 1962 war? And I have one small question with regards to that. I remember reading this ages back, and I'm assuming that this is true. We sent soldiers into war in sub-zero temperature without thermal wear. because we didn't have the funds to buy them thermal wear and sweaters and stuff and things like that. Is there any truth to that? And also, can you let us know a little bit more about the 62 war?
Yeah, you see, 62 was a very interesting period. And since I was, at that time in 62, about 13 and a half, when the situation was developing. In fact, uh, the Chinese had a reputation by then, the PLA, because they had captured Tibet and they had captured Xinjiang. Uh, they had taken on the American forces in Korea, where the North Korea, otherwise American forces after Incheon landings had overrun almost most of North Korea, and they were knocking at the border with China. And when the Chinese troops came in, they infiltrated and they put up a very good fight, and that's why they were able to hold on to half of this thing. So they had a very interesting reputation, very, very good reputation. And the Bogie of China was being built up since 1950s. It was a constant subject of study within the Indian Army. The Indian Army was watching that it was not modernizing. Its size was small. And our border infrastructure was poor. So, and this was a cause of concern, and it was a common talk. In fact, so much so that the Commandant Staff College was a person from the Indian Army called Major General Joe Lentane. He was a British officer who was retained, rather called back from England to become the Commandant of our Staff College. It's a premier teaching institution, which it is a one-year course that we all do there. So he came in 1949, 48, and remained the commandant for 7 years up to 1955. And he had carried out a lot of studies about China. In fact, when he was leaving, one of the remarks that he made to the officers who were there then and the directing staff, that, gentlemen, I'm sorry that I'm going, and I'm leaving you as cannon fodder for the Chinese. Now, this is on record, in our staff college history, that this was the general feeling about the Chinese, that their capabilities, their superiority, and us not doing much. Everybody knew that something had to be done, but somehow it was not happening. And as we progressed, we first had the traditional foreign policy, forward policy, which was that there were frontier regions, even Northeast. Look at the names we gave them. Northeast Frontier Agency was NEFA, that was Arunachal Pradesh. And there was a frontier service, a special IAS service for that area only. And so both sides, China as well as us, because boundaries are the hallmark of a nation. This is what a nation is all about. So these regions were frontier regions and not surveyed properly, not demarcated, the boundaries not demarcated. So everywhere flag planting used to go on. So we started planting our flags in the Northeast. We did that using the Assam rifles. And Tawang was under the Tibetan kind of a control till 1950. It was only in 51, one Major Keating, who was from the Frontier Service, that he went there and secured Tawang in 1950-51. And similar activities started in Ladakh. Now the Chinese were doing the same thing. In Nefa, we had already reached the McMahon line. So in Nefa, there wasn't much trouble. But in Ladakh, where they had already, controlled part of Aksai Chin, now as we inched forward from the present LAC, these areas were about 20 kilometers further towards Tibet, or into Tibet rather, into our own territory, but today towards across the LAC. And so then we started clashing with the Chinese. And this happened in 1959.
Yeah.
In 1959, there were two incidents. In one incident, they fired at our post in Longju, but there were no casualties. Then, of course, what we celebrated the National Police Day in 1959 at Konkala. That's where the present incidents are also taking place, Konkala, Hot Springs, and Gogra. So there was one, why we were using the police, and it was the CRPF and the Intelligence Bureau in Ladakh, and Assam Rifles and Intelligence Bureau in the Northeast. Is that we were calling them as border troops. So we were not saying that it is the army. And so there was a clash, and in which we lost 9 soldiers killed and many more wounded, which is become the national police. So this brought the whole thing to the fore. Till then it was all hidden. Something was happening, but nobody knew what was happening. It's like in present times, things were on since end April, beginning May, but it hit center stage on 15th June, when the Galwan incident took place. The Konkala incident was something like that. In fact, I wrote about it. I said, this is the Konkala moment, where suddenly the thing has become center stage, that something is amiss, something is happening. So now the Prime Minister Nehru ordered the army to deploy and take over the operational area. The infrastructure was not ready, and the resources were limited. Of course, post-haste efforts were made. Yes, there was certainly shortage of winter clothing, but there were Indian-made inners and outers and all. Indian-made equipment was there, but certainly there was shortage. And our weapons were, Chinese had, there was asymmetry. We were using bolt-action rifles. Chinese were using semi-automatic rifles. They had far vaster resources. From their side, the infrastructure was better. So it was a kind of, there was a feeling, an airy feeling within the army, and which even as a teenager, we all sensed it, that something bad is going to happen. We are not prepared. And when it came as a big shock and as a calamity, because as usual, we were building up, in the public domain, and this thing we were building up when we confronted them at Galwan, sometimes in July 1962. That place was very much upstream from here, not where the present clashes. Our post was almost close to the source of the Galwan River. We were much ahead. From there, our troops stood fast, and so we said we have called their bluff. Their Chinese are not going to fight. They have no stomach for fighting. So the whole effort was to dare them, and we'll call their bluff. And then, of course, there was the politicization of the army, which had happened. There were people who had become connected to the hierarchy amongst the Congress. There was General B.M. Kaul, who kind of, shot into prominence, and he was specially made the co-commander of 4 Corps, which was in the Northeast. Then, in fact, everybody, even he himself, believed that the Chinese will never attack. And when he went to this place, Namkashu, and that day the Chinese were actually attacking one of our posts on the Thagla Ridge, he says, "Oh my God, they actually mean business. They are attacking." So this was the level of the way the leadership was. This was overall this thing, and so it was a disaster waiting to happen, and we came to grief. And it would be just wrong to blame only the politicians. I think apart from the fact that we were poorly equipped and we were short of resources, but military leadership was also found wanting. And our performance, even with our limited resources, was not to the expected levels. We only gave a fight in a very small number of places. That is Trishul and in Valong, and a bit of small sporadic actions here and there. Elsewhere, it was the virtual uh, uh, defeat by superior tactics, by superior this thing. And moment the Chinese came around us by using the mountain trails behind the Sela position, which was a fortress position. The leadership just collapsed. At the divisional level, the div commander collapsed. The corps commander did not take any action, and we were back in the plains of Assam. It was there was a kind of a eerie silence all over the entire country, and the morale was very low, and even as children in school, everywhere we felt it. Uh, and then that's also then, of course, in such defeat, we start making stories, and bravery is used. Bravery and those who are killed, sacrifice is used as a kind of as an alternate narrative. Look, we lost so many, we lost territory, but our men fought bravely. We did this. The Chinese came in human waves, and they were dead all over the place. Absolute nonsense. The Chinese had proper tactics, and they never came in human waves. But these are the kind of stories that were made, and these kind of myths that making that continues. And it's omnipresent in the armed forces all over the world. So this is how I, as a young child, watched it. Then, of course, I read about the 62 war later in detail, had a chance to meet many veterans. That's why I written, a number of stories on the 62 war. In fact, we didn't, for shortage of space, we couldn't write. And then otherwise, the stories are there online. And that is why I was very vehement about that. We must be very alert about what's going on in Eastern Ladakh today.
We've got to talk about that. I have a couple of. I just want to see what the chats are looking like. The people getting quite excited in life. Okay, there's a lot of questions. I'm just going to ask one question that I have with regard to the 1962 war. There was one story that I remember reading in the India Today ages back. I don't know if there's any truth to it, and something that's sort of been told on the internet multiple times was that if Prime Minister Nehru had used the Indian Air Force, we wouldn't have lost a lot of land. Is there any truth to that, or would there have been a similar retaliation from the Chinese end?
I think there is a truth in this thing that had we used the Indian Air Force, we were in a better position. Chinese Air Force was at that time not as good as the Indian Air Force. And we could have struck at their logistics columns and at the lines of communication, roads and all, and we would have interfered with this. But to say that we would have prevented the defeat and all is wrong, I think, because the issue is relative, and Chinese would have definitely brought in their Air Force, whatever it was worth. And they would have taken our Air Force on. And I don't think the end result would have been different, but certainly we would have been, with the support of the Air Force, given a better fight. Then we must remember that it was 1962. And the use of Air Force in the mountains without precision-guided munitions is not that. Firstly, it's not that easy, and you need special techniques of targeting places. And to destroy a bridge, you require scores of sorties because it is the accurate delivery was not there those days. And you would use rocket attacks, or you had to come into high dive attacks, which is difficult in mountains, or you had to use the free fall, bombing by aircraft like Canberras. So the effect was not that. Even in Kargil, where after the initial run up, where we were using conventional tactics and conventional approach, and then we lost 2 aircraft, and then we started using high altitude, this thing with precision guided munitions, that was modified iron bombs and all. But the effect was limited. So it is, I would say that the end result would not have been very different. But yes, we certainly would have put up a better fight.
Okay, so there's a lot. I'll just take some questions and then my manager is messaging me saying I look sleepy. I'm not sleepy at all. I'm very alert actually. I'm just very. This is my concentration phase. I'm he's saying have some coffee. I'm like no, I'm not. I'm highly alert right now. Okay. Um, there's a lot of questions. I'll just read a couple of them. Kaushal Dongre, thanks for your question. I'm so sorry. There's just too many questions to ask, so I'll have to avoid that one. Sinish Malikal says, "What rank are you most proud to have earned?" He's
I
asking
think
you this question.
the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, I became a commanding officer of at the rank of a Lieutenant Colonel. See, commanding officer is the real first command. You have a cohesive unit, about 800 bodies, and in the regimental system, or any system for that matter, anywhere, the commanding officer of a unit is he is God. You know, he just has to, no matter what the overall rules, regulations, or whatever may be the case, moment the commanding officer gives an order, it will be carried out. No question about it. And but at the same time, we must remember that as a commanding officer, you there are 800 pairs of eyes watching you. They watch your every step. When you are deified, they watch your every step. And if you are not a role model, then you come to grief. You're not a good commanding officer. You have to be a role model because you are administering justice. You can send a person out of the army. You can give him up to 1 year imprisonment in civil jail. Those are the kind of powers that you have. You have to look after their welfare. You write the CRs of so many officers, JCOs. Their careers are in your hands. Of course, it's a layered organization. So everybody is watching your every step. Both your personal conduct and your professional conduct has to be of the highest order. And I found that I think even as when we became senior officers, the person you respect most is the commanding officer. If ever in doubt about any situation, no matter whether the corps commander has briefed you, whether the brigade commander, div commanders have briefed you, all you had to do was give the CO a chance. And I used to always say that. I said, let's give the CO a chance. Let him say his bit. So once you heard him, and he will tell you the exact situation, there'll be no myth making and there'll be nothing of the sort. So and we must nurture our commanding officers because that's where the action is. You see in the CO of 16 Bihar, in 15 June, he led from the front, because it demanded, because in times of danger or threat, everybody looks towards you. And I have written a very nice story about a commanding officer in the book about the attack to capture the Raja post, Colonel N.M. Colonel Khanna, his unit was pinned down below the Raja post, and daylight had come about, and there was, in fact, he was facing a tough choice whether to abandon the attack and do it next day and so on and so forth. And the reputation of the unit was at stake, and unit was badly pinned down. So he said, look, this way it won't work. So he just got up, stood on the rock, and he took out his jersey and started waving it like this. And so seeing the commanding officer, the few people next to him got up, then the others got up, then the others got up. And so there were overall about 300 to 400 in the front attacking echelons. And then suddenly the whole body started moving forward towards the post. It's a 7,500 feet high post. It was an uphill attack and through fire and movement. And Colonel Khanna himself led his own CO's party, this thing known as CO's group, and he entered the minefield. He was initially hit by a shrapnel, a grenade shrapnel. He was wounded. Then later on, he was hit by a machine gun, and he was killed in action. But the Raja post was captured. And so that famous thing is there that that's why they say that the saying went like this, that Raja Litta, Raja Ditta.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I'll just do it. I'll just do it.
Okay.
Something went off. I don't know. Just a second.
No, you're on. We can hear you loud and clear.
You can you see me?
Yes, absolutely. It's all
Okay,
good.
I can't see you, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So this is what the commanding officer is all about, and this is also what leadership by example is all about. So a commanding officer is the, what should I say, the soul of the unit. Everything is dependent on him. I was not as proud, even if I had become a chief of army staff, I wouldn't have been as proud as I was the day I became the commanding officer of my unit.
Wow, that's really nice. I'll give you a few seconds to see if the videos any. I'll just read a couple of chats till then. Neeraj Krishnan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Every day you come, you're my best friend in the whole world. Okay, Anirudh Agnihotri has asked a question which is about. I'll just take a couple more. Yeah, okay. Rohan Beer Singh, your question is something that is already on my mind, so I will ask that shortly. Anirudh Agnihotri asks, please share any army insider stories / legends of Lieutenant General LP Bogie. Reed Slender was the thread recently. I don't know what that means. But any stories about Lieutenant General LP Bogie?
So he wants to know about General Bogie Sen.
Yeah, he basically wants a story, an insider story about him.
Something more about him.
Yeah. Just anything. I think he's just excited in
general. General Bogie Sen was the commander of the, I think the 161 Brigade, the brigade that landed in Srinagar, and he was responsible for all the actions in the valley in the initial stages, and it was a sort of when he uses the word slender was the thread, that when first Sikh landed there, one of his units, the enemy was already at Baramulla. Baramulla had been already looted, and the drapes, including the nuns and all, had been violated. In fact, the ex-commanding officer of First Sikh, the first unit to land there, was in Baramulla, and he was killed there. One of the ex-commanding officers of First Sikh. Anyway, First Sikh moved forward, and जिसे बोलते हैं कि by the skin of the teeth, the place was, Kashmir, the valley was saved, because had they reached the airport, then all would have been lost. So that is why the title of the book, Slender Was the Thread.
Okay.
General Bogie Sen sort of went on to become an army commander, and but thereafter there is a cloud over his personality. In 1962, General Bogie Sen was the Eastern Army commander. That means he was the man responsible for NIFA. And most of the books record that his conduct also left much to be desired. He left everything to the co-commander, and when chips were down, he did not intervene and to redress the situation. I thought I must mention this part, but otherwise, one of the few senior officers who had participated in the Second World War and done exceptionally well, and extremely articulate and very well-read person General Bogie Sen was.
Okay. Thank you so much for that reply. Okay, we have AB. Sorry, I can't take your questions. Too many questions coming in. People are very excited to have you. Everybody's like, let's ask all the questions that we have in our minds. There is one particular question that I just wanted to get. I think one question which Rohan Beer Singh has asked is about how you basically captured the first POW, which was Lieutenant Pervez Qureshi, who's the later the PAF chief. We'll come to this story later on because I want to get this other thing out there. This is a good question by Rahul Verma, who says, I understand people in military are not applicable to vote during elections. What's your opinion on that, and should that be changed?
So we first cover this bit about the POW.
Absolutely, sir. Whichever question you choose.
Okay. Now the thing is that I was in 71, on the eve of 71. I was still shy of 23 years, just by a few days, about 10, 15 days. Normally, a lot of people think that the war began on 3rd of December. Actually, we had started small-scale operations around about 10th of November. And prior to that, the Mukti Bahini operations were being coordinated, from our side, and their training camps and all had been established. Now, as we went into Bangladesh, we were operating in the area, the salient that goes towards the town of Jessore, a place called Boira. We had entered from north of there, and we had gone on 20th of November. We had gone about 15 kilometers, taking a circuitous route to a place called Chowgacha, and we were there, and we had a squadron of armor with us, and there was minor opposition on the way, which was brushed aside, and we were trying to rush the bridge on Kabadak River, where one of the tanks got stuck, and thereafter the bridge, it required to be proper engineering resources to cross, so we were stuck at the bridge. And further south from us, a similar action was being done by 14 Punjab, the Battle of Garibpur. In fact, a movie is being made on this Battle of Garibpur. So 14 Punjab had crossed the Kabadak River. They were a little closer to the border because we had gone further north, east from Boira. So they had crossed over, and they were counterattacked on the morning of 22nd by the Pakistanis. And it was a fierce tank battle ensued. We had a squadron of our own tanks, 45 cavalry, commanded by the Chiefy. He was known as Chief, Major Chiefy Narang. And his second in command, or one of the troop leaders, was Colonel Tejinder Sidhu. And Major Narang was killed in action. Teji Sidhu had a shell passing through his legs and near his knees, because the PT-76 tank is a very fragile tank, very, very light tank, thin armor. So when the Pakistanis were using Shafi tanks, so with the shell, it was a sort of a kind of a solid armor-piercing shell. So it went through the turret, and Teji Sidhu was standing in his turret and directing the tank fire. So it went through his legs. So fierce battle, but to cut the long story short, that entire squadron of Pakistan was written off. 9 tanks were up in flames, and 1 or 2 had been abandoned. And out of the total 13, 14 tanks that he had in the end only 2 or 3 left out of that. But then there was a squadron of F-86 Sabres positioned at Dhaka. They were constantly attacking us, strafing us during the day. And on 22nd, they again had 1 or 2 sorties that come in when it's a sortie, it's a missions. A mission may have anything from 3 to 4 aircraft. So it's a mission. And so they had come and were strafing, especially the tank which was stuck on the bridge where we were stuck. And they would come in high dives and this thing piece. Since war was not declared, then our Air Force could not come up. However, precautions had been taken, and we had, of course, we were as ground troops clamoring for air effort. Then on 22nd at about, I had gone to our rear location, was coming back, and I saw the Sabres up ahead, merrily making high dive attacks. It goes up something like this, and then they come down like this, for rocket attacks and cannon attack at the whatever they could see. They were actually eventually told us they were firing at Grove. They couldn't see much. So suddenly I saw that a mission of 4 aircraft went very low at treetop level over me. And I was little shocked. I said, I hope, and I said, another mission of Pakistan Air Force has come. And uh, this next is just about a 40 minute, 40-second action. As they went over me, they peeled off and headed for the sabers. The sabers had got no idea as to what was happening, because the sun was setting. The sun sets early in the east, and the aircraft had come, from the west against the setting sun, and so they visually couldn't be seen either. And in any case, it was out of this thing of any kind. Those days, the ground, whatever the people who control the aircraft from the ground were virtually non-existent. So they peeled off, and I found three Nats aircraft taking on one Sabre each, and they were all up in flames. It all just about lasted 40 seconds, 35 to 40 seconds. Wow. And the moment that was done, the aircraft peeled back and headed back to Dum Dum, or I think the mission came from Dum Dum or from Klaikunda. And this was it. And then we saw two parachutes coming down, one coming down towards our area, because two aircraft had come down. One aircraft was what actually damaged, but it limped its way back to Dhaka. So when this parachute came down, and I was the staff officer of the unit, it's called the adjutant, is the operational staff officer of the unit. And I somehow had an uncanny feeling that this man may be harmed, because he was just strafing us, and now the men have seen this. So then I ran towards the parachute, and then, but by the time I reached, the soldiers had already reached him. And some of them, in the fit of anger, despite very clear orders, they were, busy hitting him with rifle butts and all. I literally had to lie over him to protect him, so that, and being a prisoner of war, you're not supposed to handle prisoners in this manner. And then a prisoner can always give more information to us. So in any case, these are the Geneva Conventions, have to be observed. So then, of course, we brought him. He had a gash here, which we dressed, and I carried out his initial interrogation. He was Flight Lieutenant Pervez Qureshi Mehdi, sort of very tall gentleman, shaken up but stoic. But once we told him that no harm would come to you, and you will be treated as per Geneva Conventions, he relaxed a little. We gave him a cup of tea, and after about 2 hours, packed him off. And one very interesting thing happened is that he probably was a smoker, so he wanted to have a cigarette. So when we told him anything else, he's a cigarette. So we said, no cigarettes here. This is important, because I was then in 4th Battalion, the 6th Regiment, the famous Saragadi Battalion. So we had an artillery officer with us. He just sent me an email. In fact, this is an addition to the story I have written, because I myself had missed it out. So he had narrated this then to me, that this is what also happened. So he produced the cigarette and gave it to him. So he went a little distance away and had a smoke. Probably his last smoke was in the POW camp. He got no cigarettes to smoke. And then he was evacuated. And in 97, I read a news item that Pervez Mehdi Qureshi, and the name, instead of Pervez Qureshi Mehdi PQM, it became PMQ, something like that, had become the chief of Pakistani Air Force. Of course, our Air Force knew about it, because the Air Force prisoners were kept at Gwalior, and our Air Force had carried out his interrogation. Then, of course, I also wrote to the Army headquarters and all. Look, I was there when this man was captured. So it would be interesting to read his detailed interrogation report done by experts, which was done at Gwalior. But overall, the Air Chief Marshal Pervez Qureshi Mehdi enjoys a good reputation. In fact, he was critical of the Pakistan Army operations in Kargil. So this is the story, and he was the actual first prisoner of war, really, of the 1971 war. In Forsyth, we still have parts of the wreckage of the aircraft, his ejection seat, and the parachute, and of course as memorabilia.
I remember reading the story, and by the way, the descriptions of I obviously I didn't know what a gnat was and all that stuff. I had to Google it, and I finally got my answers. But it's very vividly described, the entire attack and how it was done. So it's a great bit. I have a question which is a little strange. When you're interrogating a prisoner of war, aside from trying to get information from them, is there any other conversation that you're having about anything which is non-related to that at all?
Actually, you are supposed to. Normally, what happens is that most prisoners they are very shocked when they are caught. As per Geneva Conventions, you are supposed to give your number, rank, name, and your unit, and no more. But since everybody is so shaken up, that my experience has been that in the initial stages, the prisoners blurt out everything. You can ask them anything, they answered. But in most cases, like a pilot coming down, he hardly knows anything. And then whatever he knew, it was hardly relevant to us, in the sense that we asked him, what were you trying to bomb or trying to attack? So he said, I could see a tank at the bridge, and so we all were going for the tank. And generally we couldn't see the troops, so we really thought they'll be in the groves of the trees, and we were firing them at them. Interestingly, when we later on went to the aircraft, and there had been at least 20 times aircraft had come over us, and all focused on that tank, the tank which was on the ground. The tank was safe and sound. Nothing happened. It was retrieved and it was put into use very soon. So, however, while the pilot is there, like he saw his pocket, and he was this thing. He had his wife's photograph. I asked his wife. He said yes. So you can ask any questions. And especially with the beginning of the war, it was a friendly kind of an affair. But generally, prisoners are very shocked. They will give you all the information, anything that you want to ask, and that's my own experience. And the rest, of course, one can keep hearing stories about how people refuse to part with information, or they were tortured and this and that. Generally, organized armies and all do not torture people. These are aberrations that happen at the lower level.
That's very interesting to know as a civilian, because our assumption is always that the only way to get information out is by keeping them for days and days and all this. So it's interesting to know that people are so shaken up that they'll give information up top.
Yeah, in fact, there is also a theory which says that keep quiet until your comrades are safe. That means don't part with immediate information if it would endanger your friends, your comrades, your defenses. So try to hide that information, and rest our own experience. And then later on, my unit was also guarding the prisoners of war. So I also saw the expert interrogators from the intelligence branch working to interrogate. We found that generally there's no requirement to torture or to any of the prisoners. Most of them, and in any case, later they can only give us general information. Like, we know a lot about the Pakistan Army, but they can fill in the blanks. They give us basic intelligence. The real intelligence is what is required at times is at the front line, where, especially where ground battle is taking place, you suddenly come across a prisoner. You ask him how many people are attacking, if there's a defender, how many are defending, and so on. So in an ongoing battle, it's big deal, and rest also depends upon the level of the person you have caught. You catch hold of a junior, soldier. He doesn't even know. In fact, I have a very interesting anecdote on this. So this way, I was told to me by one of the officers of my unit, and my unit had an interesting history because in '62 we had some prisoners. My unit was in Valong, and in '65 we had a major kind of a setback that we had gone for a roadblock in area of Khemkaran, and there the unit was surrounded by tanks, and about 120 other ranks got taken prisoner of war. Very unfortunate, but it happened. And just a few days before that, the unit had captured the position of Bogie, and that's the battle honor of the unit also. And the unit was specially picked up from Bogie, taken to a different sector, and sent on this mission. Now, when they became prisoners, we had a very happy-go-lucky officer. He's still alive, lives in Jaipur, and is very senior to me, but very dear friend. So he was asked some questions by the Pakistani intelligence in the POW camp. Who is your brigade commander? Who is your div commander? No, he was kind of a easygoing person. He actually didn't know their names. So he said, I don't know. No, they thought that he is trying to be funny. And so he got a thrashing, during the interrogation. So when he came back, so he told the other officers, for heaven's sake, at least tell me the name of my brigade commander and div commander so that he won't get thrashed again. So I'm just telling you in a lighter vein that at the lower level, you hardly know anything. Right. So it doesn't matter. So this whole bogey about prisoner of war giving information and all, I think is overplayed. Right. You can actually extract most of the information. What you extract later doesn't really matter at the front. And at the front, they generally do blurt out whatever you ask.
It's a great story. Okay, I'll just take a couple of questions which are coming in from chat. Okay, there is. I think we'll in the Preet Dhaliwal will come to this question about Kashmir. There's a lot to cover out there. Let's talk about what went down. I think recently. I think since we touched upon it right now, and you've had some interesting opinions with regards to Doklam, with regards to the fact that I think you said that India should be clear about China and what happened with it, as opposed to denying that it happened.
Sorry, you're just say it again, because somehow the audio volume has gone very low.
I think let me see if there's something I can do from my end. Manav, can you do anything from your end about that? Can you hear me better? Any better right now?
Little louder. Make it more louder, it'll be better.
One second, I'll just check if people can hear my voice in general. Manav, can you hear me in general, or is there an issue overall? Nothing from mine. Oh no, it's fine. I think I'm audible.
Okay. So you are about the present situation.
Yes, sir.
As to why we have hidden the information, etc.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me put it this way. See, it is the government and the military's prerogative that if for the requirement of security they want to not disclose certain information, they can do so. But if there is a problem, if there's a setback, there is, in my view, there is no need to hide it. Militaries have had setbacks, and many setbacks before. In the Second World War, Germany advanced 1,000 kilometers and was at the three major cities, Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad. 1,000 kilometers from the Polish border. And you still fought back. So there were minor ingresses here and there by the adversary. Heavens have not fallen. and nothing much is going to happen. And as we are well aware that once you block, then it's not that easy for the Chinese to make further headway, and they'll get a bloody nose if they do attempt that. So that is one part. Why does it happen? I think there are two reasons. One is security overall, that you don't want to lower the morale of troops and all. But as I said, a small incursion without a fight, through a preemptive action in a disputed area, which was not physically held. We must remember this, that, gentlemen, not the entire LAC is manned like the LOC. Our main defenses are at the dominating heights. And the area is so vast, it's like if you have your fingers. If you man this, you require 5 troops. But if you do this, you can man it with probably 1 or 2, portions of the same number of troops. So our defenses are here at the knuckles, and these areas are looked after by surveillance and by the ITBP, who is policing the border and not defending the border. So these areas are known, and we also have plans that should anything happen, should the Chinese be coming there, then we will preempt the Chinese. We'll also go and occupy them. So we also have preemption plans. I mean, I have mentioned that before. Let me say it again, that this area, Sirijab, Finger 8 area, I was there as a combat group commander, commanding a mechanized battalion along with 2 squadrons of armor. It was my task to capture it preemptively, should anything start happening. And since BMPs are amphibious vehicles, there was no way to reach Finger 8 from that side, because the Finger 4 is a cliff area. So we had plans to take the BMPs across the Pangong Tso. It's about 6 kilometers wide there, to take them across the Pangong Tso and capture Sirijab by swimming across with the BMPs. Tanks couldn't go, and we thought it doesn't really matter because the supplies will be with us. So this was my task in 1988. Now, apparently, either we were surprised, or when things started happening, we misread the situation, and we didn't do all this. Otherwise, nothing stopped us from going and occupying between Finger 4 and Finger 8, or for that matter, in the areas from where the Chinese have come. So in this case, they achieved surprise, and they have secured sections of unheld areas, about 8 kilometers ingress in Pangong Tso, unspecified ingress at Hot Springs, Gogra, and in Depsang Plains, limited ingress in Galwan. So it doesn't really matter. Heavens have not fallen. And these areas can be retaken. We have blocked them and they cannot come forward. Our military has not even been engaged. And everybody has got, upset and this thing over the unfortunate fiasco that took place on 15th of June, which in my view was a disaster. Troops don't fight like this. They don't go without weapons, or if they have weapons, they don't use it. There is something amiss. Some bad orders have been given. But that, of course, as I said, Army will inquire into, and we'll come to know the result. Though, of course, on that also, there was a report that inquiry has been held and the military has denied it. I don't know why they have gone into denial on an inquiry. You logically should hold an inquiry as to why 20 people killed and 75 people badly wounded in an area where both sides had their militaries deployed. And who gave these silly orders about not firing? There is no such rule or no such regulation which bars you from firing when the security of your territory and of your people is threatened. I mean, it was a fiasco from all counts. The bravery of the troops and how well they fought is a separate issue. We are not looking at that. Now, why do all governments try to hide military information? And the military too. Military does it to cover up its own failures. So there has been some sort of an intelligence failure, some sort of a failure where we didn't preempt these areas, which we should have gone and occupied. We allowed the Chinese to occupy. So the military wants to guard this failure. It hardly matters. The government, which has shown a kind of has been created a macho image for itself, with its a very tough stand on the boundary issues. It has taken very strong action against Pakistan. Now, suddenly, it cannot be seen that we have lapsed when it came to China. So, after having taken a reasonably strong stand at the time of Doklam. And the credit goes to this government that it has developed the border infrastructure. But the flaw here was that you were developing the border infrastructure in the sensitive areas where China feels very, very threatened because territory that they have usurped in the 50s, that is Aksai Chin, and during the 62 war, get threatened from these areas. Daulat Beg Oldi, Depsang Plains, Dibio, we were making roads inside the river, the Pingongso, and the Kogra Hot Spring. These are the areas that threaten these areas. And if Chinese keep control of these areas, then they are at a sort of a tactical advantage, apart from their overall plans of asserting their hegemony over India. So the government cannot be seen to have been facing a setback. The military doesn't want to be seen as that they were caught napping and failed to preempt the enemy. So consequently, I would say denial and obfuscation. But by and large, it is today clear to everybody that what the ground situation is. And militarily, the situation is well under control. We have got enough time. There was an element of surprise with the Chinese in May and June. And we have pumped in enough resources. We have built them up, and we are now confronting them. And diplomacy is at work. So let's see how it plays out. If diplomacy doesn't work, and I'm sure that our government and our army has not ruled out the military option, but then you don't have to do it immediately or in a hurry, and you can do it at a time and place of your own choosing.
As a civilian, I mean, I'm obviously completely incorrect in thinking this. I assumed that the reason why there was no firing allowed was because they didn't want to escalate. They didn't want it to escalate. Is there any truth to that at all, or that's just?
Yeah, the thing is like this. One is that a lot of people have cited the 93 agreement. The 93 agreement, which says that it doesn't say that firearms will not be carried. It says that when troops, patrols of both sides come face to face with each other, they will exercise maximum restraint in use of firearms. So it's to exercise restraint and not that firearms will not be carried. So let's be very clear about it. In fact, the foreign minister said that the troops were carrying firearms. Secondly, that there are other rules, of course, that if you are carrying out any exercises, firing within certain distances from the LAC, you are supposed to inform. Like aircraft can't fly within 10 kilometers, but those are all part of the confidence building measures. Nothing in the confidence building measures debars you from not carrying your weapons. That is one. Secondly, these agreements and this kind of a thing is meant for routine peacetime activity, where on the kind of a unsettled border, there patrols and do tend to meet, and you want to avoid incidents. But beginning 5th of May, the Chinese have come in strength, regular forces in Pengongso and all these areas, in multiple places, including in Sikkim. And there are reports that they have carried out precautionary deployment in Nepal and all this thing. It should have been clear to us by now that these are not border policing. This is proper military operations. And when proper military operations take place, then you don't do actions like this. then you go prepared that things can go wrong. And we are masters at carrying out border meetings. Even if this disengagement process that was going on after the meeting held on the 6th of June, that we are very clear. Don't we know about the Trojan horse? The Greeks left the speeches of Troy and left behind the horse, and then the horse was dragged inside, and Troy was celebrating its victory, and then out came the men at night from that horse, and the Greek ships came back. So all these things are well known within the military, and you don't trust anybody. So there's no question of betrayal by the Chinese or by anybody for that matter. And all this talk of they were prepared for this, they were prepared for that, because we had indulged in fist fights earlier. Both sides had indulged in fist fights earlier. Both sides were prepared. But in a military situation, to do this is absolutely wrong. I think what has happened is, and that is exactly what the inquiry must find out, that at some stage, probably it began with the ITBP, that they started avoiding carrying arms in peacetime to avoid incident. Possibly. I'm just making an assessment. And then when this sort of a thing happened, since we were into denial and obfuscation, that nothing has happened, and we were all in a tearing hurry to see to it that this engagement takes place, and at least in Galwan they go back. And then we hope that they will go back elsewhere also. So that is where the problem started. So, and they were told, make sure, and I think the CO would not have avoided using arms if he was not specifically ordered by somebody that you will not use arms. He was specifically, and the order was for this reason, that we wanted to quickly that they should go back, and so that our story holds, and we don't have a escalation, which you said rightly, that it was probably because we wanted to avoid this. That was the back of the mind. Avoid escalation, disengage, restore status quo, so that nothing has happened. And the failure of which happened by the ITBP in the beginning, and the army, and to some extent by the government through denial and obfuscation, it doesn't get highlighted. This was the reason. Right. And this was the reason that led to this, that these soldiers didn't fire, and they engaged in kind of primitive combat, unheard of in the history of the Indian Army, unheard of, that people have got involved in such an operation without their weapons. And I was horrified when I saw even veterans and others trying to justify such actions on the media and on the social media. Absolute disasters. In any case, whatever be the environment, soldiers are supposed to, even handling a riot, a crowd during communal riots, army fires for effect. There's no question of firing in the air or doing this or doing that or pushing them with dandas. We fire for effect. That is what the armies are supposed to be doing. No rule, no order can prevent a soldier, a commander, from using all weapons at his disposal if the lives of his men and the territory of our country or his post is threatened. This body of troops was given very specific instructions. And I think this truth must come out. Otherwise, in the end, the conclusion is obvious. The foreign minister said they were carrying weapons. And that means indirectly, you are blaming the troops, that they were carrying weapons, and because of whatever reasons, they didn't use them. I can understand, even if they were misled by the 93 agreement or whatever, but once the lives of your soldiers, once your territory is being threatened, then where's the question of following? What agreements are we following? What agreements has China followed? 93, 2005, 2008, 2013, all flouted. And what are we trying to justify such a silly action by quoting the 93 agreement? So it was a fiasco. And the sooner we get to the bottom of it, the better it would be, because otherwise it will remain a blot on the name of the Indian Army.
There's a perception, and I don't know. I'm assuming that this is a probably incorrect perception that the reporting of the skirmish, I mean, it's called a skirmish repeatedly, was largely on the Indian media side, where we said that this happened, and obviously I'm not discounting the deaths, and I mean, it's a terrible thing to lose so many soldiers, but the perception is that because China lost 43 soldiers, this was a win for India.
I think a ridiculous justification. A ridiculous justification. I mean, the China lost 43. Firstly, our dead bodies we carried and cremated them, 20 of them. Our 75 wounded are lying in hospitals. And we are only merely speculating that 43 people died or 83 died, even if 500 died, so what? I mean, we have lost so many men, and through a kind of something that should have never happened. This business of, I tried to explain that thing earlier also when I said that this trying to justify a wrong, a failure by highlighting the sacrifice of the troops. The troops have sacrificed. Don't blame. Don't call this operation wrong. The troops fought bravely. This is the kind of silly excuse. The troops are supposed to fight bravely. They always fight bravely. But why and how it happened is something that we must get to the bottom of. And this is no justification that so many Chinese have been killed.
Right. Okay. I had to talk to you about, okay, there's a lot of people asking on Super Chat. It's lit up. People are very happy to have you here. A lot of people are expressing surprise. People are like, he's actually here. There's a lot of comments. They're like, why is he here? Is the question. I'm like, no, he's been nice enough to come. So I really appreciate that. Okay, I have a few. Rahul Verma, okay, this is done. Inderpreet Dhaliwal is done. Sorry, Inderpreet, sorry, Vishal, there's a lot of questions even that I have. So, Ankita Das, what is the composition of territorial? Okay, this is an interesting question, which I think, and then I think we've answered the China question. I wanted to come to after this a couple of other questions that I had with regard to. I'll save it. It's something else. Okay. Ankita Das asks, Jai Hind sir, what is your opinion of Territorial Army? Can someone in mid-30s also contribute life to Indian Army?
I think what the Territorial Army is a very good concept, and it's a very workable concept, and we have a well-established Territorial Army. Only thing is that most people are not aware of it. But you can join Territorial Army as a soldier. I think the age is, I'm not very clear about it, but that can be checked on the website. And as an officer, I feel that even I see no reason why you can't join even in your 30s. There must be some limit, but I think you can join. And a lot of people must join. Those who want to contribute. Then these days, the Territorial Army also gets embodied. Normally, Territorial Army, the concept is that you do your training, go back to your civil vocation. But when the unit is embodied, or when the government wants to use the Territorial Army, like we are using them in Jammu and Kashmir, a lot of our Territorial Army personnel are embodied. And then you go with the unit. And I know many officers, Major Navdeep Singh, who is very active, in terms of looking after the rights of the soldiers. He's a lawyer. He's actively operated in Jammu and Kashmir, and Territorial Army units go there, and yet your job remains safe, and you can go back to your job when required. So most of the people get worried about this. Okay, look, if we are embodied and we don't get a chance to go back, so our careers will suffer there. Well, that is a risk factor. because, but in times of war, if the unit is embodied, it will give you a chance to serve alongside the rest of the army. You may not get frontline jobs in the Territorial Army, and you will probably get you know just behind the front jobs. But then that's also, of course, depends on how much you have trained and all. So
Right.
I would say you can and you must.
There's your answer, Ankita. Okay, Vishal Arora, thanks for your question. Shekhar Jadhav, thanks for your question. I have okay, Harshdeep Sethi has a question that I'll come to, but I have a question with regard to online and Twitter, and I think you've dealt with a lot of Twitter stuff over the last couple of years. The first one, of course, is one which I mean, which is related to this gentleman called Abhijit Bhattacharya, who is always known to be very logical and very well thought out. His arguments are always very deep and nuanced, no matter what he's talking about. You got into altercation with him, and it was with regard to. And I'm just going to read out the sort of exchange, and if you want to contribute to it, I mean, or we can just ignore it completely because I don't think it's really worth your time. Whichever direction you choose.
No, you are talking about Abhijit Bhattacharya who writes articles.
Oh no, sorry, I'm talking about the singer. I think I got his surname right. What is his surname?
Yeah,
Abhijit.
Abhijit,
The singer. The singer.
got into a bit of this thing scrap with him on Twitter because it happened at the time of the incident of this person being tied on the jeep.
Right. Yeah.
I was very opposed to the concept of any such thing being practiced by the armed forces, because our armed forces have a outstanding track record in handling insurgencies. In fact, we have developed a kind of a very model. The Indian Army model of fighting insurgencies is admired and recognized all over the world. Nowhere else in the world have the insurgencies been totally controlled as the Indian Army has done. Look at Mizoram, Nagaland, Manipur, Northeast, no longer insurgencies are there. We fought a sustained campaign based on model on a very clear-cut moral code that we will not carry out any human right violations, because the doors must be kept open for negotiations with the leadership and with the people, and their hearts and minds have to be one. There is no military solution to insurgencies, and it is always, the solution is always political. As I said, Northeast is a good model. Now, what has happened in Kashmir is that in Kashmir also the same model was followed, always. And it was, I mean, we have had the NDA government earlier also from 98 to 2004. And at that time, the insurgency was at its peak. There were good 10,000 odd terrorists present in the valley. Annually, something like 1,500 to 2,000 terrorists used to be killed. And every day there were encounters, something or the other was happening. But the model code that was of the Indian Army was never abandoned. We repeatedly created conditions for the government to work out some sort of a solution and with the people. So failure really it was of the political strategy of successive governments that this happened. At this juncture, and even for the last 5, 6, 7 years, the insurgency is at a very low level.
Okay.
And it's at such a low level that there is more crime in Bombay than the kind of sort of violence that is there in Jammu and Kashmir today. The number of terrorists killed is very small. The number of terrorists is very small. Yes, surprise, sporadic incidents always do take place. It's often said the terrorists have only to win once. That means they do one successful operation, but you have to be successful all the time. However, the noise about the whole thing is very high. Pakistan is involved, so our antipathy against Pakistan. Secondly, there is a kind of a religious angle to the whole thing. There is a baggage that we all carry in India, and that is of the 1,000 years of our history where we were ruled by outsiders, and a large part of that rule up to round about 1800 was under the invaders who had come in from the west, and most of them predominantly had followed the Islamic faith. So this is the baggage we all carry psychologically. This puts us this pitches us emotionally against the Kashmiris as people, that they are aiding the insurgency and they are doing the same thing. We saw no harm in talking to the same people of NSCN who were the leaders of the insurgency, but we don't want to talk to leaders of the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. So this is of course part of the government policy. To come back to this point about this incident, I analyzed the incident threadbare. I wrote long articles. I've written 5-6 articles on the subject. In my view, it was a rogue action done by a junior officer in a kind of in his mind. He felt that he wanted to teach a lesson to all these stone pelters, and this whole story about the election officers being cornered and being held to ransom or being by a large crowd, it was just a concoction, because he tied a man to the jeep, took him around 18 villages for 2 hours and paraded him. And in the video, there are no crowds, nothing of that sort seen there. The whole thing was actually concocted, and it would have best been handled by a rap on the knuckles to this officer, probably of his being posted out from there, a minor army punishment in form of a reprimand or something, and a clear-cut announcement by the armed forces that this is wrong, this should not have happened, that this incident should not have happened. But we didn't do that. The entire nation became emotional. Everybody, politicians, veterans, everybody, as if a calamity has taken place. I mean, that we are accusing Major Gugai of a wrong. And why are people blaming him? That's the right tactics. If those were the right tactics, why has the Indian Army adopted them? And in this, the rise of the protest against me for having called this the operation out as wrong, one of the leading lights was Abhijit Bhattacharya. And then he came hammer and tongs at me and doing this to me, doing that to me. Then I told him, I said, I have seen many an upstart like you, and even at this age, I can also handle terrorists and I can handle an upstart like you. And so that kind of a thing, that is how the whole thing ended. Otherwise, Abhijit is a nice singer. I remember when Gul became a singer in 99 and Shekhar Suman did a show. Abhijit specially came and sang at that show.
So but I mean, I was just shocked by the kind of language he used. It was and it was Ashok Pandit and Abhijit who basically said the same thing, which is both of them copy pasted almost the same message, which was, "Sir, I wish the soldiers who were kicked, beaten, and humiliated on the streets of Kashmir would have been you and would have seen your reaction." I mean, it's just completely needless.
That I read those. I think that it's like this. If you bring yourself down to the level of the terrorist, then there's no difference between you and them. And we must remember that all of us who cry for soldiers being killed in action, if just count the number of accidents the Indian Army has in a year,
Right.
about we have almost 300 to 400 people killed because of reasons other than bullets, other than
Right.
terrorists. How many people go to their funerals? How many are bothered about them? Are they not doing their duty when they are driving a vehicle? As a man who dies in Siachen Glacier because of cold or because of other reasons, or man who dies in Leh or Ladakh because of sickness, is he not doing his duty? Suddenly, the whole thing is talking about a soldier humiliated, that whole thing. Where were these people when these 15, 16, 15 men, 20 men were killed without firing a shot? I mean, these are ridiculous kind of logic, emotional rants, which have got nothing to do with reality.
Yeah. I mean, the most and so this is just going to be the last thing that I have to say about this, which I just thought was really ironic of him, where he said he ended it by saying hashtag salute, hashtag Indian Army. I think completely forgetting that he was with the Indian Army for 40 years. I'm like, how do you forget that in your hashtag itself? After this whole stupid statement, so anyway, there's also a lot of a lot of conversation that's been happening with Major Gaurav Arya. But let's not beleaguer this particular point. I'd like to ask you actually about you mentioned something in this book which I thought was interesting, and something which I think a bunch of other people have also said, which is that you can't win over Kashmir without winning over the soul of the people. So how do you go about, and you mentioned the fact that both Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh had a different tactic as opposed to the current government. So what is the and having been one of the leading lights there, what do you think is the right way forward with regards to Kashmir?
Yeah, I think see, the thing is that what I actually wrote was that Kashmir is not going anywhere, right? A country with such a large army and a huge country like ours, and then a country with nuclear weapons doesn't allow its borders to be changed, right? And be it Pakistan against Pakistan, or even be it against China. I mean, a lot of people think the Chinese army is superior, it'll rout us and this and that. Please remember that we are a nuclear power. And once push comes to a shove, and if something adverse happens to us, we have also got the same rights as any other nuclear power has. So with an army of this size, we have held it against all odds. When the insurgency was at its peak, as I said, the highest number of terrorists killed was in 2003, 2,800 in a year. And today, barely 150 odd terrorists are killed, something like that. Numbers were much larger. The violence was immense. We still held Kashmir together. Kashmir didn't go anywhere. So Kashmir is not going anywhere. And time and again, the job of the military is to control terrorism, to prevent infiltration, control terrorism, so that we create the political climate to talk to the people. Why go far? When you look at the statements of even of the present government, when the Prime Minister first time went to Kashmir during the elections in 2014 in December, during the election campaign, just see his speeches. I recall one that was Sher-e-Kashmir Stadium, sometimes in December 2014, when he said, and the words were something like this, that पहली बार 30 साल में पहली बार सेना ने अपनी गलती मानी और एक एक्शन के लिए अपोलोजाइज किया और उनके खिलाफ कार्रवाई हो रही है. This was in reference to an incident which took place at Badgam earlier, and where some young students were driving in a vehicle, and the vehicle was asked to stop at the checkpoint, and it didn't stop, and firing was done, and those young people were killed. They were unarmed. They were just students and who panicked or otherwise, whatever. So now this was, of course, highlighted as the HR high-handedness or rules of engagement being violated by the soldiers. And eventually, the Northern Army commander, um, who is now retired, General Huda, he went on record to say that an inquiry has been ordered. This incident should not have happened. So this was Mr. Modi's own statement in December 2014. And this is what he said. You went into a coalition with a government, with a person whose leader is still being put in jail after Article 370. So what is it? What kind of a policies are you following in Kashmir? That you follow one policy today, when people criticize them for aligning with the PDP, people said that, oh no, this is pragmatic, this is for the future of Kashmir. Other day, then you start again. So basically, it is us versus they. We are not making serious attempts to engage the people, as we have made in the Northeast. In the Northeast, the insurgency began in 56. And we are still talking to the NSCN. Still talking to the NSCN. One of the oldest insurgency outfits. And we have signed an agreement which was never made public, and far-reaching agreement. And earlier, there are success stories. So the military strategy has succeeded time and again. We bring the insurgency down to a particular level, always. We did it in 96. Then government got elected from 96 till 2018. There was always a government, a political government. And between 2000, somewhere around 2011-12 to 2014, these 3 years, look at the level of the insurgency. It was at very, very low level. Mr. Vajpayee and Dr. Manmohan Singh, rather even before that, Mr. VP Singh, right from time, we followed a policy of strategic restraint. That let us eliminate the terrorists, let's engage the people, and then we will find a solution. But what has happened is that our own politicians, of the mainstream politicians of Kashmir, PDP, the National Conference and all, they have not measured up. They could not provide the governance, or they could not assuage the feelings of people. So one is their failure. Second is the mistrust that the governments have, the people of Kashmir have, of the central government. They feel state governments are mere pawns, and it is the central government that calls the shots. I think we have not made a serious attempt. Otherwise, a strong leader like Mr. Modi, if he engages with them in direct talks, I find no reason as to why a solution cannot be found.
Okay, and there's a weird thing which happens that, every time I go through any one of your videos, any one of your interviews, one of the comments sort of dismissing anything that you're saying is basically saying, "Ye to Aam Aadmi Party ke hain," which I find as an absurd argument, because I'm like, you're not talking about the topic.
Not only it is absurd, yes, I was from the Aam Aadmi Party. I joined the Aam Aadmi Party in 2013. For the last nearly 4 years, I have disassociated myself from the Aam Aadmi Party. For the last 2 years, I am no longer a member of the Aam Aadmi Party. And even if you are from the Aam Aadmi Party, does it take away the wisdom? Just because a doctor belongs to BJP, will he not give proper medicine to a member of another party? I mean, military experience, military wisdom, analysis is one thing. Then just to say that you are too critical for what? If I say that the Indian Army must be reformed, it must become better. There's no point being best in India. You must be the best in the world. What is wrong with it? And that this government has not provided. We just discussed at length how I explained in 62 what sorry pass we reached. Is the situation any different today? Despite 6 years of this government, which is gung-ho about the military in power, just in February, March, when the new chief of defense staff was appointed, he was shouting from the rooftops that we would be ready for 2.5 front war. And within days of this, the situation developing in eastern Ladakh, we are scurrying all over the world capitals buying arms and ammunition. So these are the kind of, and if I write articles which criticize the government, that as a percentage of GDP for the last 6 years, the defense budget has been the lowest since 1962 as a percentage of GDP. So, and all this, one side you promise OROP, you give OROP. Then you say that the pension bill is very high, we can't increase the defense budget. There are compulsions of our country. But at the same time, then stop bluffing and blustering. And then you see, this is a very illogical kind of an argument that you are anti-national because you say this. What is so anti-national about it? If our chief said that, and our CDS said just 4 months ago that we are ready for 2.5 front war, then what is the problem with them today? They haven't said a word since the beginning of this crisis. And they were so vocal that they hardly gave a chance to the media to ask a question before they blurted out something in the previous months. So what is so wrong about it? I mean, if you criticize this kind of a thing, if they should have told the government that we are not prepared. The Chinese are far ahead of us. The differential is far too much. Why did they not say so? Why did they keep saying that we are ready, we are ready, we are ready? So in the military hierarchy, because did it tilt with the wind and gave a sort of incorrect advice that we are ready. Ready for what? So what I have been trying to highlight is that reforms are necessary, change is necessary. If the national security requires change at the macro level, the NSA, National Security Advisor, was tasked to make the national security strategy in 2018 when he was made in charge of the Defense Planning Committee and the Strategic Planning Group. He was given the task, please evolve the national security strategy. Today, right, there's no formal national security strategy. And I'm not saying it from off the cuff, because this is an answer given in the parliament much earlier. So when you, so this whole logic of us versus they is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, at least talk about the topic at hand as opposed to like just some random thing on the side. Yeah, so you've been very generous with your. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorabh, there's a very interesting word called ad hominem. Ad hominem, which means avoid the subject and attack the person.
Yeah.
Ad hominem.
Which is always it's a very successful tactic. It works quite nicely for a lot of people who are like, yes, this person is the opposite of me. So yeah, we have a couple of questions that I'd just like to ask you, and then I mean, you've been very, very generous with your time and all your opinions. I really appreciate it. There's a question just coming from Shubhada Mahure. Jai Hind sir, is there any advice you'd like to give to people appearing for the SSB interview for the armed forces? Pleasure to listen to your views.
Yeah, in fact, yesterday itself, I had done a kind of
the Unacademy, yeah.
Done a class for Unacademy and Command Summit for Defense Services exams. I think, you see, your academic exams, which you take part in, are just a test of your academic knowledge. I think a good, high average student who, whatever level he's appearing, if he's appearing for NDA +2 or for direct to IMA and short service, he's a graduate, a high average student can pass that exam. That's the academic exam. So there's no issue there. Now, what is it that, then there's a selection board. Now, what is it that the selection board wants to see in you? I think basically the military standards of leadership and the value system is an absolute value system. Why? Because you are the nation's instrument of last resort. You cannot fail. So you want the best, the young men to join you. So a lot of people ask me this question that aren't the military academies supposed to develop all this? Yes, but so what is being checked today in the selection board is your potential for leadership. So it's the same qualities that you require in a military man, in a military leader, that which are assessed. And if I were to just tell you in brief, I think there are three things, which are, I mean, there are a number of things, but I'll start with 1, 2, 3. Integrity. You can't have a dishonest man dealing with the lives of men, a man with a duplicitous personality. Physical fitness and bearing. Look at any of our military icons, Shivaji, look at Maharana Pratap, look at Rana Sanga, whatever, even the portraits, you see tough, physically fit men and full of confidence. You see the depiction in the portrait, in the pictures. And see Sam Manekshaw, see his photograph.
Yeah.
Or for that matter of any general, you will find that unless the man has got a good bearing, he is physically fit, and he is the integrated personality who will not lie, who will not cheat his soldiers, who will always speak the truth. Because you cannot have leaders doing this sort of, not doing this kind of a thing. So that's one part. Next is intellect. A lot of people think the army doesn't require brains. No, a soldier must have, officer must have intellect. So through the intelligence tests and other things and all, your intellect is also tested in the selection board, because you must have a backdrop. The backdrop tells you why of matters military. Why have these things evolved? Why have we reached this stage? Why do things happen in a particular way? The evolution of the armed forces. A training or the actual doing of things is how. That's a very low-end activity. So you have to have a backdrop of knowledge to deal with this low-end activity to perfection. So this is the next. Then will and initiative. Will is the mental faculty that allows us to take action, that enables us to take action. Will. And intellect provides the thought process. So an action, initiative, action. These things are all an outcome of will. So if a person has will and doesn't have intellect, it's a dangerous thing. But if a person has intellect and doesn't have will, it's useless.
Right.
This is the will, initiative, and action, with or without orders. This is also checked. Then they see you in you. Are you a role model style of a leader? A role model style of a leader. That means they see that are you walking the talk yourself. So there are group tests done in the selection board where they check you for this. Are you walking the talk? Are you willing to shoulder the responsibility yourself? It doesn't mean that you should start becoming the lead. No, you have to be a leader, but you have to also give an example, which I gave earlier. Then, of course, is moral and physical courage. Whatever assessment system they have, they check you out on these matters. So these are some of the qualities in which your potential will be assessed. So the people who exhibit them more, they will be the ones who will be selected. Now, a lot of people say, but how to develop these? Our EQs have been shaped by our parents, our environment, the society, the schools, the colleges. But all these qualities, they are fundamental human qualities. They are present in all of us. What is required is that you have to bring them to the fore. You have to bring them forward, start thinking about them, start talking about them, and start putting it into practice. Walk the talk. No point saying that I'm going to develop my integrity and then take a shortcut around the roundabout or jump the traffic light. So walk the talk. And so this is the kind of things that the selection board checks. You all have it in you. Everybody has it. I'm telling you, there's nobody who doesn't have it. It's just that our education system, our parents, and you yourself as an individual have to bring them out. Think of this. And so this is extremely important. One thing I forgot to mention is communication skills. That a leader must have good communication skills. Now, communication skills does not mean that it has to be, you have to speak in English. You can speak in Hindi. You can speak in Punjabi. If you are allowed to speak in Hindi in the selection board, and if you feel ill at ease with English, you can tell them you can speak English. But your clarity of thought, that you got a thought process, you're speaking clearly, you can convey clearly what you want to say to the audience, to the recipients. All orders in the military are still given by word of mouth. Why? Because the military wants to, because when you give orders, the troops must see that do you believe in the orders yourself? They must see your confidence level, that you can convey something very nicely and very surely and leave no doubt in the mind of the troops. And your body language must show the confidence that you are getting. So communication skills and confidence are extremely important. These are these qualities. So think of these qualities all the time, try to evolve them, read about them on the net. And I have no doubt that most people, those who are net savvy today, can find own solutions for this and easily get selected in the selection.
That's and so one of the keys is that you have to cycle 30 kilometers a day while reading A Message to Garcia, which is a essay that you mentioned a bunch of times, and I went through it. It's genuinely very inspiring story. So best of luck. Sorry, yes, sir.
Message to Garcia, incidentally, Gaurav is Sorabh is the most well-read essay in the world.
Yeah. I was very surprised to learn that. Yeah.
I strongly recommend to your viewers and listeners that they must read The Message to Garcia. It's a life-changing this thing. I've written the story also in my this thing, how I got The Message to Garcia from my father when I was going to NDA. He gave me a moth-eaten booklet, but it's available on the net, and it's it's a must-read for any child. And there's another concept called the OODA cycle, that in life or anywhere, observe, orient, decide, and act. So all the time in your life, you are doing this. Whether you're driving a car, you observe, orient, decide, and act. And in business, in the armed forces, two sides confronting each other, observe, orient, decide, and act. Whosoever does this action faster and repeatedly faster through cycles is a winner. So the Message to Garcia is one thought process of the director's style of command, of initiative, of walking the talk, and the OODA cycle is another example of how to get the better of your adversary in competition, sports, or in war.
So there you go. Shubhada, best of luck for your SSB interview, and that's, I mean, you don't need more inspiration than that. That's this is OODA and Message to Garcia and so much more. So just implement all of that. I'm sorry I couldn't take, again, I just want to apologize to all the people who I couldn't take the super chats to. But this, sir, has been an absolute honor and a real pleasure. I have to tell you this story though. I got in touch with your literally agent or manager, and she told me, she's like, listen, sir is a very intimidating figure, and I'm like, I expect him. I'm already intimidated by the thought of him. But you've been nothing but generous and very kind and very adjusting to everything. I genuinely appreciate all the. We've been talking for almost like over 2 hours now. I have to mention this book, Indian Army. It's for sale. It's published by Westland Books, The Indian Army Reminiscences, Reforms, and Romance. I've read it across a week. I really enjoyed it. So please go out there and pick up the book. It's a genuinely good buy. Anything else you'd like to say about this, sir?
No, thank you so much. I think, of course, it's up to the viewers whether they would like to read the book or not. But all that I have talked, see, I've covered a vast spectrum of military life, and including most of the things that we discussed today and many others have been discussed and explained in layman's language. In fact, when I was to write for the News Laundry, Madhu Trihan, one of our famous journalists and media personalities, she told me, disarm the army. That, we tend to write about military and military language and which is not understood. So what I have written is can be understood by anybody,
I literally came in from absolutely nothing, knowing nothing about a lot of things, and a lot of clarities were provided by this book. So I would say go out there and get it. It's a really good buy. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And please follow Sir on Twitter as well. And he's quite active there. And so generally, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. This has been an absolute pleasure.
I thoroughly enjoyed, and I must compliment you to your questions, not only of yours but also of the audience, were very incisive. And in the recent times, I have done a host of other, interviews, and I've been to various book clubs. I think I thoroughly enjoyed my 2 hours with you, and very enlightening and a very interesting discussions that we have had. Thank you.
So I just observed, oriented. What is the? I've forgotten the third one already. This is how bad I am. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time. And by the way, Gul was kind enough to launch my second book for me ages back. And I messaged her. I'm like, I'm going to be interviewing your dad, and she's like, best of luck. So thanks to Gul as well.
No. In fact, I must tell you that this was the kind of reputation that travels by word of mouth within the army. And one thing I used to do was that, like in Jammu and Kashmir, I had 400 commanding officers, and I interviewed each one of them. And so a lot of people ask me that you have got 35 generals and nearly 100 brigadiers serving under you. Why are you wasting your time and interviewing these 400 battalion commanders? COs. I said that when a CO knows me, then he knows that there's a common chain of thought, transmitting from the army commander right to the grassroots. And if he has faith and trust in me, and I have faith and trust, I tell him that I have faith and trust in him, then we will have a more cohesive organization. To the brigadiers and generals, I talk more often as it is. And every commanding officer that I interviewed, he told me at the end of the interview that, sir, I was very scared before I met you, but now I'm full of confidence, and I have faith and trust in you that you will always stand by us. So it's one thing to have a spoken reputation, and another thing to be what you actually what you really are.
See, I've had faith and trust in you right from the start. So that's been working flawlessly for me. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your time, and that's so many great stories, and way more. There's a story about I don't want to have you say them, because I think people should just read them in the book. There's a story about building toilets. There's a story about mismatched shoes. There's so much very interesting content. It's great. So please go out there and get the book. Thank you so much for your time. I'll just say goodbye to people. You can log off. So I'll just say bye to people for them. Thank you, sir. All right, that was Lieutenant General H.S. Panag. Please follow him everywhere. Really appreciate you guys joining us. I apologize, I couldn't take a lot of your questions. Vishala Arora, thanks a lot. Ankita Das, I got your question in. Shekhar Jadhav, Harshdeep Sethi, Jay Shinwali. There's a lot of people who ask questions. I'm sorry I couldn't take them. I didn't want to disrespect them in any way. Okay, again, as I said, today I have a show happening at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. I have Traveling Pants, so you can get tickets on sorabhpanth.com. Tuesday, we have a lineup which is Gaurav's, which is Gaurav Kapoor, Gaurav Gupta, and Sumit's Gaurav. That's going to be super fun. Come see that. On Thursday, we have Sumaira Sheikh and Uruj. That's going to be fun as well on Thursday. Saturday, I have Vikram Chandra, writer of Sacred Games, maybe joined by another guest. And Sunday, I'll just figure out who's going to be coming. 31st August, as I've already said before. Harsha Bhogle is going to be here 11 o'clock in the morning on Monday with Kumar Varun and Anu Menon. So thanks a lot to everybody, man. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys had fun. If you had fun, please share this video and like it and all the rest of that nonsense. And if you want to support this podcast, InstaMojo and PayPal is the place to do it to keep everything running. And thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, Uruj is coming. Yes, Ritik is very excited. Uruj is coming. Just want to mention, It took longer to coordinate Uruj than it took to coordinate this interview. So I just want to put this out there in the world that yeah, dude, this is really I really had a good time today. I have been nervous about this interview for the last 4 days. I really didn't slept. I didn't slept at all. So yeah, I've been nervous. I read the book. I did a lot of research, and this was genuinely really good fun. So thanks to all of you. You guys are keeping this entire podcast running. I really appreciate it. Varun Grover, that would be Sacred Games panel. Everybody, just want to mention, everybody doesn't want to do YouTube live. So some people don't want to do it, which is perfectly fine. It's a slightly Harsha Bhogle tomorrow. No, I said Harsha Bhogle is on 31st, Nalin. It's on 31st August is Harsha Bhogle, not tomorrow. So yeah, thanks a lot, man. Let's get this up to like 50 more likes and we'll hit 1,000 likes. And please go there. And again, you don't feel any pressure to donate. All you can do if you like this is to share, like, and tell your friends about it and keep coming back Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you tonight if you're coming for the show and see you on Tuesday with one more Wake Up with Sorabh. Thanks a lot. I love you all. Marry me. Goodbye.